My
The sun
love,
hung low over the dusty
please.
plains of Silver Creek, bleeding
Please
orange light
stay
across a
with me.
sky as wide and lonely as the town itself. The dirt road that wound between a few crooked buildings was silent, save for the slow creak of a swinging saloon sign and the faint clatter of a horse's hooves in the distance. Evening had come, and most folks had already shuttered their doors. Only the wind seemed awake, carrying whispers of dry earth and memories of better days. From that wind came a man, ragged, limping, and half broken. His coat was ripped at the shoulder, boots worn down to the sole. His beard had grown wild, and the dust of the trail covered him from hat to heel. He looked like every hard-luck drifter that ever wandered through the West, except for the eyes. Beneath the grime and exhaustion, his eyes were clear and sharp, eyes that had once looked upon a better world. He stumbled down the narrow path between two weathered homes, leaning on a stick for balance. His lips were cracked, and his throat burned dry. The world swam before him, and the only words he could manage were hoarse and desperate. Give me, I want. He didn't finish the sentence. His legs gave out. The sound of his fall brought someone to the door, a young woman, no more than 22, her brown hair tied back beneath a patched bonnet. Clara May. Her dress was faded and clean in the way that comes from careful scrubbing, not new cloth. She lived alone now, ever since her pa passing and her mama's illness took her last coin. Folks said she was too proud to beg, too kind to turn anyone away. She stepped down from the porch, clutching a small lantern. The man's shadow lay across the dirt like a broken scarecrow. Sir? She asked softly, kneeling beside him. You hurt? The man blinked at the light, his lips trembling. Water, please. Clara hesitated. Her mind flashed to the small jug by her stove, the last of what she had fetched from the creek that morning. The well had run dry 2 days ago, and every drop mattered. But the sight of his trembling hands undid her hesitation. Wait here, she said, though she knew he couldn't move. Inside her cabin, the flicker of her lantern cast long shadows on the rough plank walls. The place was humble. 1 table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and a Bible worn to soft edges. She lifted the clay jug from the counter and poured what was left into a cup. When she returned, the stranger was trying to push himself upright. Don't strain yourself, she murmured, kneeling again. She pressed the cup to his lips. He drank greedily, gasping between sips, as though the water were life itself. When the cup was empty, he looked at her with something close to shame. Didn't mean to take it all, he rasped. She gave him a small smile. Ain't no sense in saving water if a man dies thirsty beside your door. He blinked, as if her kindness stung. Thank you, he said quietly, voice still rough. You best come inside, she said. Night's getting cold, and you don't look fit for sleepin' under the stars. With effort, she helped him to his feet. His weight leaned heavy on her small frame, but she managed to guide him through the doorway and into the warmth of her tiny cabin. She eased him into the wooden chair near the hearth. What's your name, mister? He hesitated. Call me, Sam. All right, Sam. I'm Clara May. I'll fetch you something to eat. She took a small pot from the shelf, poured in a handful of beans, and added a splash of water from the same jug she'd just emptied. The fire crackled to life as she stirred. Behind her, Sam watched the flickering flames, eyes distant. You live here alone? He asked after a long silence. Clara nodded. Been that way near 2 years now. Pa passed from the fever. Mama followed a winter after. Folks helped where they could, but times are lean all over. Sam lowered his gaze. You shouldn't be living out here alone. Too many bad men on these trails. Clara let out a soft, humorless laugh. Bad men don't come looking for poor girls, mister. Nothin' here worth talkin'. She brought him the bowl of beans, steaming and simple. He took it in his shaking hands, staring down at the meal as though it were a feast. Eat slow, she said. You'll make yourself sick. For a long while, the only sound in the cabin was the quiet scrape of spoon against bowl. When he finished, he set it aside and leaned back, his eyes drifting to the fire. You've been kind, he said finally. You don't even know who I am. Clara shrugged. Don't reckon I need to. A man's thirsty, he's thirsty. I'd hope someone would do the same for me. He gave a faint smile. Most wouldn't. Something in his tone carried weight, like he spoke from knowing, not guessing. Clara studied him a moment longer. His clothes were torn but fine underneath the dirt, sturdy leather, once expensive. His hands, though blistered and rough now, bore the faint calluses of someone who'd held reins and pens, not tools. You been travelin' long? She asked. Too long, he murmured. Rode from Missouri. Lost my horse 2 days back in a storm. Thought I'd die out there. Guess you found the right door, she said with a small smile. He looked up at her, eyes glinting in the firelight. Guess I did. That night, Clara let him sleep by the fire on a rolled-up blanket. She sat awake long after, mending her only dress by the faint light, her mind wandering to who this, Sam, really was. Something about him didn't fit the part of a drifter. He spoke careful, like a man used to being heard. When the morning came, she found him already awake, sitting by the window, watching the sun rise over the plains. Smells like rain, he said quietly. She smiled as she poured cornmeal into a pan. You'll be lucky. The creek's near dry. They shared breakfast. Corn cakes and black coffee so weak it barely tasted of beans. But Sam thanked her after every bite, his manners precise, almost out of place in her little cabin. 3 days passed. Sam grew stronger. He fixed her porch step, chopped wood without her asking, and even patched the hole in her barn roof. But when she asked about his life before Silver Creek, he grew quiet. Doesn't matter, he said once. All that's behind me. One evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, he came to her with something in his hand, an old silver coin, polished by years of touch. I want you to have this, he said. She frowned. Sam, I can't take that. You might need it. He shook his head. You gave me water when you had almost none. You gave me life when I'd near lost it. Keep it. Maybe it'll bring you luck. She took the coin reluctantly, feeling the cool metal against her palm. When she looked up, he was already saddling a borrowed horse from a neighbor who'd offered him a ride east. Where will you go? She asked softly. Home, he said simply. If it's still there. Clara watched as he rode down the dusty trail, the setting sun painting his shadow long across the ground. The silver coin gleamed faintly in her hand, catching the last light of day. She didn't know his real name. She didn't know where he came from. But somehow, she felt that wasn't the last she'd see of him. And though her cupboards were bare again, her heart felt strangely full, warmed by the memory of a stranger's gratitude and a promise left unspoken in the wind. The wind swept across the plains of Silver Creek again, just as it had months before, but this time it carried the scent of change, rich, new, and golden. The town had begun to stir from its dusty slumber. Word had spread faster than wildfire. A millionaire was coming. Some said he was an oil man from the east, others swore he was a railroad investor or a cattle baron. But no one really knew his name, only that his wagons carried polished trunks, fine horses, and men in tailored coats. Clara May heard the news while trading eggs for flour at the general store. She barely paid attention at first. Rumors blew through Silver Creek like tumbleweeds, here one day, gone the next. But when she heard that the stranger was traveling with guards in a personal carriage, something in her chest stirred. That evening, she stood on her porch, her hands folded before her apron, watching the horizon where the sunset bled into the hills. Life had gone on quietly since the day Sam rode away. The coin he left behind still hung around her neck on a thread of twine, cool against her skin, a reminder of something she couldn't quite name. She often wondered what became of him, whether he'd found his home again or perished somewhere along the trail. She didn't expect to ever see him again. But fate has a strange way of circling back. It was a bright afternoon when the ground began to tremble under the weight of approaching hooves. Clara stepped out onto her porch, shielding her eyes from the sun. A dust cloud rose on the main road, and through it came a line of wagons, shiny, new, and unlike anything Silver Creek had seen. At their head rode a man on a tall chestnut horse, dressed in a black coat and a wide hat that cast his face in shadow. The townsfolk gathered quickly, murmuring, their faces filled with awe and curiosity. Children darted between legs, trying to catch a glimpse. Shopkeepers closed their doors just to watch. When the riders halted in the center of town, the man on the chestnut dismounted with practiced grace. His boots struck the dirt with quiet confidence. The sheriff stepped forward, tipping his hat. "Welcome to Silver Creek, sir. I hear you've got business out this way." The man smiled. A calm, familiar smile. "Something like that," he said. His voice carried softly, but it was steady, commanding without effort. Clara's breath caught. That voice. She knew it. Her heart began to hammer as he turned his head, the light catching his face fully for the first time. Clean shaven now, his hair trimmed and shining in the sun, eyes sharp and clear, it was him. Sam. Or whoever he really was. He looked across the small crowd, scanning the faces until his gaze landed on hers. Time seemed to stop. The bustle of wagons, the chatter, even the wind, everything fell silent in that moment. Then he smiled again, softer this time, and walked toward her. Clara stood frozen on her porch as he approached. She wanted to run, to speak, to ask 100 questions all at once, but her voice wouldn't come. When he reached her steps, he took off his hat and nodded respectfully. "Miss Clara May," he said quietly, "it's good to see you again." Her lips parted, barely a whisper escaping. "Sam," he chuckled, a sound both warm and heavy with meaning. "That's what I called myself, yes. But my real name's Samuel Hayes. I didn't tell you before because, well, I wasn't quite myself when you found me." Clara blinked, struggling to take it all in. The last time she'd seen him, he'd been starving, weak, and broken. Now he stood before her like a man out of a story, confident, rich, and strong. His coat alone was worth more than her whole cabin. "I don't understand," she said finally. "You said you'd lost everything." "I had," he replied softly. "When I came through Silver Creek, I'd been robbed. My horse gone, my papers lost. Folks back east thought I was dead. But you," he paused, eyes glinting. "You reminded me what living felt like. You didn't ask who I was. You just helped." Clara felt her throat tighten. "You didn't owe me anything," she said. Samuel smiled faintly. "That's just it. I wanted to owe you." He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a thick envelope, sealed with wax. "I came back to settle that debt." Clara frowned. "Debt? There ain't no debt between us." "There is," he said firmly. "The kind that can't be measured in money, but maybe this'll start." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a deed to 100 acres of fertile land east of town, complete with cattle and a small farmhouse already built. Clara stared, speechless. "I can't take this," she whispered. "This is too much." Samuel shook his head. "No, Clara, it's not enough. You gave me water when I was dying of thirst. You gave me a roof when I had no name. You made me remember what decency feels like in a world that's forgotten it." Her eyes glistened, and she looked down at the deed, hands trembling. "But why me? Why come all the way back?" "Because," he said simply, "I never stopped thinking about you. Every mile, every town, every deal I made, I kept that coin you gave me." Her eyes widened. "The silver coin. I thought you gave that to me." He smiled. "I gave you mine. But I had another, its twin. My father's coin. When you saved me, I realized what it truly meant to have wealth. Not gold, not land, but people who show kindness when they have nothing to gain." Clara turned away for a moment, blinking back tears. "I didn't do it for thanks," she murmured. "I know," he said gently. "That's why you deserve it." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The sun dipped lower, painting the town in shades of amber and rose. The townsfolk had drifted back to their chores, but a few still lingered, watching from afar, whispers running through the crowd about the poor girl who'd once fed a stranger and was now talking to a millionaire. Samuel stepped closer. I'm staying in Silver Creek a while, he said. Bought the old Carson ranch down the road. Needs a manager. Someone who knows the land, someone honest. She looked up at him, brow furrowed. You mean me? I can think of no one better, he said, smiling. If you'll have the job. Clara couldn't speak. The world felt unreal. Too big, too fast. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes, he said softly. And we'll figure the rest out together. Something in his voice, the same warmth she'd heard by her fire months ago, made her heart ease. She nodded slowly, a faint smile breaking through her tears. All right, Mr. Hayes, I'll take it. Good, he said, tipping his hat. But only if you'll still call me Sam. She laughed, the first real laugh in months, and he laughed with her, the sound mingling with the fading light of dusk. As the sun vanished beyond the hills, Samuel mounted his horse again, but before leaving, he turned once more. Clara, he said, you once told me bad men don't come for poor girls. She smiled faintly. I recall. Well, he said with a grin, good men might. He touched his hat and rode toward the horizon, his silhouette framed in golden dust. Clara watched until he disappeared from view, the deed still clutched in her hands. That night, she placed the silver coin beside her lamp. Its twin, miles away in Samuel's pocket, gleamed under the same rising moon, two halves of a story that began with thirst and ended with grace. And in the quiet heart of Silver Creek, where once a poor girl gave everything she had, hope returned, shining, warm, and worth more than all the gold in the West.